Okay, good morning everyone. Thanks very much for coming along. My name's Dave Wild and I'm a futurist, and that means I make really accurate predictions. So I predicted we would begin at 10 o'clock this morning, and that's the one that I've ensured that we hit. The other thing that I will ensure that I get accurate in terms of predictions is we finish at 11:30. That said, we're not going to reset the room until 12 o'clock. So the formal part will end at 11:30, but you're welcome to stay and chat to people after that. The other thing I'd just like to let you know, a couple of housekeeping things. As I mentioned, there's coffee there that you can make for yourself, but if you look at the instant coffee and you start to face withdrawal symptoms, there is a coffee machine just through in there in Tankstream Labs that you're welcome to use. And also just behind through that door are the bathrooms as well. It's going to be relatively informal, so no problem if you stand up, move chairs and move around. And Andrew here, who I'm running a workshop with in the afternoon, we set up the room in the morning and we had a theory. We kind of went, that chair at the back feels like a really good one to be in. We thought, why don't we put it at the front? And then people will have this dilemma about, do I sit in the comfy chair or do I want the back row? We thought this one would be comfortable, but our theory was that in the front no one would sit on it. So we were quite accurate with that. My measure is if anyone comes and lies down and falls asleep during the presentation, I know it's not going too well. You'll notice that you don't have name tags on, but you will have the ability to know who the other people in the room are. A couple of things around that. So we're going to be putting names up on the wall there. If you haven't done it already, there'll be an opportunity to put your name up there and write it up there. In this day and age, I encourage you to take a photo of that. So if you're in a witness protection program, feel free to move your name off the wall. And likewise on that level, you'll see that there's Jack there as well, who's just doing some filming. It's just for us to cut out bits and pieces of kind of things that go, so no focusing in on anyone in particular. But again, if you've got any concerns about that, just let me know or have a word to Jack along the way. Other than that, I thought we may as well get into things. So one of the things is that what I've learned is that nice timing, just come on in. By the way, along the way, feel free to write your name on a post-it note, who you are and where you're from, and just stick it up on the wall there, and we might just grab a couple of chairs out. Now, one of the things you might have noticed already is you may be feeling, what an unprofessional opening. So he started talking and then he just quite happily changed it. But one of the things I'd talk to you about from a trend perspective is we love to talk about agility, and then we plan to be agile in really carefully planned ways. So I've learned from an innovation perspective, you have to be genuinely agile. And Claire and I had a great conversation just earlier on, and that she was saying to me, Dave, what's your hashtag for this event? And I said, yeah, great point. You need to ask my social media advisor, Mel Kettle, who's an expert in that area. Now, while I distracted her talking to Mel, I was able to say, Claire, you quite obviously have not seen the hashtag that's been on the screen the whole time, but it wasn't. Because I'll show you what I did. And this is something that most presenters do not do. Watch this. Don't know if you've ever seen this before. It's called PowerPoint. And I exit out and I get a text tool, I put something in, and then I put it back on screen. Okay? Yeah. Most people would not do that. They would say, I plan to do a hashtag for my next event. Okay? The other revelation I have to share is this is an event, but it's not actually an event. So I'm planning to run an event in the middle of the year. But as part of planning for it, I said, what better way to plan for it than to actually run an event and learn what I have to plan? Hopefully it's going to be a good experience. I have done this before. We will see how we go. Now that's that kind of speed thing. The future is being invented 10 minutes ago. This is what I love about Tankstream Labs. The future is being created all around you in this building. So as you walked in here, you walked past old established companies who are innovating, but innovation's happening even faster in here. So on the one hand, we've got this speed and we've got this agility. And as a futurist, I used to be like every other futurist. And I would go, the world's really fast moving and you're going to be disrupted. But the more I did the work, I learned something. The world's actually not moving fast at all. So as well as the future being invented 10 minutes ago, you'll also find that the future was in fact invented 10 years ago. Technology moves fast, people don't, right? Habits are slow to change. Look at yourself. Were you ever younger than you currently are now? Think about your willingness to change and how that shifts over time. And it's normally kind of about a decade. There's a great saying, businesses, startups, it was an overnight success that took 10 years to happen. Just grab a chair from the side and pull it up, no problem at all. Now, why that 10-year time frame? What changes over the course of 10 years? By the way, I'm going to coach you in some innovation techniques along the way, and this is my favourite facilitation technique. Took me ages to learn, but it's called silence. So what you do is you ask a question, and then you just stand silently. And I can outlast any room. I'm quite prepared to run us through until 11:30 just on that question, but I'm going to rerun that question again. So my question for you is, what changes over the course of 10 years? Great, yeah. So you start to get the masses. Mel and I had a fascinating conversation earlier on about convincing boards and execs of the importance of this newfangled social media stuff. I don't know if you've heard of it. Looked at the stat. What's the stat? 2.2 billion people using Facebook. What's the population of Australia? Which number's larger? You know? So people are going, I've missed out on something. But who realises? Over 10 years, what changes? What changes within your organisation, within your company? People. Who comes in to drive that change? The next generation. Yeah? So while leadership and exec debate about should we use social, should I be on social, how much should my voice be out there? The next generation comes in and go, why are we even having this debate? It's like debating should we be using paper? Right? So the thing that happens, so an example of that is if people ask me to speak about millennials, I go, why would I speak about millennials? They're just business people that are running companies. You know, the world has shifted. So that's the beauty about you can think like a futurist. So these techniques, I'm speed coaching you to think like a futurist, to try and predict the future. You don't have to imagine what might be, you just have to walk around in the streets, be more curious and open your eyes in terms of what those things are. And I'll give you an example. As we know, the future is digital. But here's the reality, that's a typo. The future's not digital. Digital is the past and it's the present. Now, I will sometimes present this to chief digital officers, so I have to reassure them, I'm not saying digital isn't important, but it's as important as air. Do I need to convince you how important air is? No, I don't. It's just a given. How do I know digital is a given within businesses? Because we now have chief digital officers. How long did that take to happen? More than 10 years. Money's important, so we need a chief financial officer. Digital's important, so we need a chief digital officer. If you want to see the future, you cannot look at your own thought patterns. They are too preformed, they are too preset, no matter how entrepreneurial you are. Whose thought patterns do you need to look at to see the future? The next generation. So how do I know the future's not digital? Because my 16-year-old son Max and my 14-year-old daughter Indigo in their lifetime have never ever said to me, Dad, we're just off to the online world. Right? It's not some mysterious world that needs a name. It's just part of life. You just intermingle with this. So then what you have to do is you have to say what comes after, just grab a chair, no problem. You just say what comes after digital, because you've got to run these things in parallel. While you're digitizing your businesses, while you're running startups that are helping people with digital, you're going to become really irrelevant if you don't say what comes next. And why it's so important is these are multi-year transitions. So you don't wait till you get hit by the trend and go, oh, we haven't reorientated our business. You think like a futurist and you look ahead. So I want to talk to you about this image here. This is from a study tour that I did with a group of businesses maybe about 3 years ago. That's like a lifetime in futurist terms. This is through the streets of New York. Now on that study tour, we spent just 5 days in New York. We went through places like Google, like IBM Watson, like MakerBot. So we were going into companies that were building the future. Everyone took photos, because in this day and age, everyone carries a camera with them. But here's the difference. I took 1,500 photos. And I didn't set out to see how many photos I could take, but I was just curious about the world around me. Now, once I got rid of all of the crappy ones and all of the duplicates, I still had 1,000 photos. Out of those 1,000 photos, this one is the most profound. There's a number of changes going on in that photo. What kind of changes do you see? Yeah, taxis and Ubers. So let's jump straight into that. I love the fact that the Uber looks like a black hearse in this case, right? So I went to New York and I'd heard that it was the city of yellow taxi cabs, but no one had told me that it was the city of black Ubers circling like sharks. And they were. Just wherever you looked, there was just a sense of black cars constantly moving. Now, I won't dive right into the detail of it, but if you start to go, why are they moving? Take a systems point of view, and a systems point of view just means to rise your mind up out of the room and look at the entire system. Because right here, right now, your mind is probably anchored in this room. But you're just a group of people, so float your mind above this room and look down on this group of people. Now start to think about the other people. Who are they? Why have they come here? Where are they from? But then rise your mind further up above Sydney and go, this isn't the only event happening, as much as I might like to think it is. What are the other conversations? What are they happening? So from a systems point of view, why were the black Ubers circling like sharks and the taxis weren't?
Because the app requires them to be moving so that they can get more jobs.
Yeah, the app requires them to be moving, but who else requires them to be moving? Absolutely the right way to think about it. People who use them? The market?
Customers in the market.
Yep. So notice how customer-centric you are, because you've been trained to go think of customers.
Nowhere to park.
No, why is there nowhere to park?
Taxis expensive.
Because the regulations haven't changed.
They have to move so that satellite can track them out so you can see where they are.
Yep, but it's not the most efficient thing to drive around, right? But there are no stands for them, right? So to catch an Uber here, I used to have to meet them in a different kind of place. Then, there's actually a rank that I can meet them at, you know. That is regulations gradually kind of changing. But if you think about fuel efficiency and the planet and that sort of thing. So what you do though, if you take nothing out of this session,
Just to quickly challenge that view, I would argue that the life cycle environmental footprint of Uber is much, much lower than taxis.
Just talk to that a bit more. I think it's a good point.
There's an argument here that it's one Uber for 20 people instead of 20 people all having cars, or taxi rank sitting in, so that if it's for a morning tea discussion, I can take you right through the life cycle analysis, but you're probably 100 to 1 in terms of your environmental footprint using Uber being 100 times lower.
Oh, absolutely.
So ranks or no ranks, and then one would argue that the taxis are a mess, that's why we put them in a rank.
Yep. But if you said, could the Ubers stop and have a lower environmental footprint at times?
I don't think they need to.
But could they?
They could, but I don't think they need
Yep.
to. That's
So
why
this
it
is
hasn't created itself.
yeah. So this is where we're going to get into. So I used to be like you. This is just my personal perspective, right? So I tend to challenge. I used to be, I think something. This must be the viewpoint. What I've since learned is to go. Actually, I can park that viewpoint for a while and entertain the other perspective and understand it more. So kind of like rather than try and defend my position, I'm trying to So but it's brilliant. We've carefully pre-rehearsed this just to coach the room. That is the mindset I want you to have today. Challenge things and look at them from different perspectives. So here's what I did. I went for a ride in an Uber. I could ride in an Uber anywhere in the world, but I could only ride it in New York at that time. Anyone else in my group could have done, 30 people, but they didn't. Now I pity the poor Uber driver that picked me up, who for 30 minutes had me sitting in the front of his Uber going, what's it like to work for a robot, you know? What's happening here kind of thing. Here's one of the things that I learned, and this is why I learned about the regulation side. The medallion, which is a license to drive a yellow taxi cab, costs US $1 million per cab. Each of those is a mini business in their own right. But here's the trend. It used to be 1 million, it was now 600,000. $400,000 wiped off the value of those businesses from a shift and change they could see coming. because Uber didn't invent ride sharing, right? There was Lyft, there were others, plenty of others before them. So if you ask for your industry, even if you're the disruptor, what is coming next that you can easily kind of see? Now, if you take nothing else out of this session, this is the fundamental part that I do differently that I think more people should do. Everyone loves to talk about in the past of being the Uber of their industry. But if I stopped people and went, great, who founded Uber and who runs it? I would get met with blank looks until Travis Kalanick hit the media headlines for his bad people management practices. But those same practices of challenging breaking regulations is why Uber had scaled faster than anyone else, right? The innovative mindset to challenge. So what you can then do is go, if I want to be the Uber of our industry, why don't I dive into Travis's thinking and what does he do differently? Now, it used to be really hard to see what was happening out in the world. Now we have the reverse. It's too easy, so people drown in information and they tend to stay in their own kind of channels. So what I do is I do a lot of hunting and I do a lot of second screening, and I know all the research that says I will be far more focused if I'm not trying to multitask, but I will also be far more myopic in my viewpoint just working on what I already know. So I'll play stuff over here and then I'll go, that's fascinating. So now I'll stop and I'll watch it. And then I'll share, not that hour interview, but I'll just share 3 minutes of it. So this full presentation I will send out to all of you. If you're in here and didn't have a ticket, no problem at all, just connect in with me and I'll get a copy across to you. Because what I want to play for you is going back to October 16. So we're just a bit over a year old. But Travis Kalanick, before he got pushed out as CEO, had an interview as Vanity Fair's New Establishments Summit. And what I find fascinating is he is being interviewed by a really knowledgeable interviewer, editor at the time of Vanity Fair. But as you watch this interview and find yourself laughing at the interviewer, just realise that we're laughing at ourselves because he's asking the questions that probably all of us in his situation would have asked. And also have a look at Travis's sense of impatience and just wanting to get on with things. So for example, I said today we're going to talk about self-driving cars, but it's not about self-driving cars, right? In that case, it's about this physical and digital merging together and we are entering that future. So don't just go self-driving cars, go how cool, go that ability to see stuff you couldn't see otherwise and merge them together. What does that mean for your space? So in terms of today, I'm going to be updating you on some recent things, but I'm also going to be looking back over the past couple of years and say, if there were a couple of things that I hadn't seen that I think I need to have seen, what are they? Because in that 10-year time span, there's a lot of things that people haven't seen. In terms of where I'm based, so I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand. And one of the things that I find fascinating about New Zealand that I often have to remind New Zealanders of is that we're not called Zealand, we're called New Zealand. So it means in terms of the world, we are a really new country. So Australia, in terms of people being on this land, you go back tens of thousands of years. New Zealand, we think we can do 700 years at a push. If we kind of look at British settling and meeting with Maori, that goes back 200 years, right? So it means our perspective is a bit different on some of these things from a futurist point of view. The second thing is, beauty of Australia is I don't need to tell you where in the world we are. A lot of other countries I do have to help locate. But have a look at where we are, over on the edge of the world. Even if I had a view of the globe that didn't put us right on the very edge, we are still tucked away. Now what it means is, as a nation, we have to be outward looking. And I remember a conversation I had with one of our software companies. So Rod Jury, who founded the accounting company Xero, talked about when he scaled that business, the difference about being in New Zealand is once he was working off a population base of 4 million, if he wanted to go larger, he couldn't do what he would do if he was based in the States and tell his sales team, just keep doing the same thing, but drive a bit further down the road, right? In New Zealand, you have to say, what's happening out in the world? What do other people need? So that's the viewpoint that I bring here, looking at things from the edge of the world. But any of you are capable of moving your mind to the edge of the world without having to physically move your life and your family to the edge of the world. So what I run through my mind is this curve. And businesses love to look at bar charts. Which part of the bar chart do businesses get really excited about? The middle. And why? Because that's where the most sales are, that's where the most customer need is, that's where the most demand is. But where does the future begin? The future begins on the edge. And it's really tricky. You've got to figure out, is it a signal of the future or is it noise that you should ignore? And what most people do is they wait that 10 years until, oh, we definitely need to do this newfangled social media stuff. How do we do it, kind of thing. As opposed to saying, for 10 years, let's track it, let's play with it, let's look at it. So I'm now going to play for you the longest clip I have ever played for people. So I normally slice out 2 minutes, 3 minutes. At a push, I'll take it to 5 minutes. I'm going to break a world record and I'm going to subject you to a 12-minute video clip. But this is saying over the past 2 years, if I could only watch one thing, it would be this. And it is the fourth industrial revolution. It's a theory put forward by the World Economic Forum to help explain the changes that we're going through. What I want you to do as you're watching this is do some reflective thinking. So just as Kobe and I had that conversation before, we're going to get you together with other people to have some of these conversations, to share what you're thinking and to hear what they're thinking. If you haven't had a chance to put your name on a post-it note with your company up there as well, just there's post-it pads and Sharpies on the bench there. Just while this is playing, wander up and put it up there. But otherwise, just settle back and have a listen. So for me, a couple of things that connect in there. There was that comment towards the end about people ask me whether I'm optimist or whether I'm a pessimist. You cannot be an innovator without being an optimist, because otherwise why bother? Why do the hard work, right? But that doesn't mean I'm a deluded optimist. So I can watch videos like that make me feel optimistic about the possibilities. I also have a cynic and skeptic that I run at the back of my mind, going, really nice soundtrack that's making me lull things into it, right? Really nicely edited, cutting out the things that don't fit with a particular viewpoint kind of thing. But what it means is it highlights things I can then dig deeper into. So when you think of this age of fake news that we live in, whatever your viewpoint is around fake news, what most people do is they don't dig deeper. So if something comes up in your Facebook feed about bionic eyes, people go, wow, how cool, we're all going to have these and circulate it around to people. Instead of going, let me just do 5 minutes research to see how much do they cost and how many people currently have them. So if 8 people in the world currently have bionic eyes and they cost over $100,000, safe to say that next year not everyone's going to have them. But if I'm in the business of optics, absolutely I now need to track and watch what's happening there. This thing of tracking and watching is really important. So I was watching that clip because I've seen it before, but not in this context. But what else was I watching? Yeah. And here was an interesting observation that I only just realised when I took a moment to pause and reflect. If I look at the demographics of this room, what is the visible difference that I notice when I walk through the streets of Sydney?
No seats.
No seats. I'd even say from an ethnicity point of view, right? So this is the whole kind of thing about what one person's viewpoint is very different to another person's kind of viewpoint. So you then go, how might I get those inputs? So I've done work before, say for example, around the perception of New Zealand. And I said, yep, you've got a brilliant offshore team, but I suspect there's a lot of bias in terms of who those people are. So I want their viewpoints, but also can you please get me some international graduates? Because I also want a young, fresh point of view. Huge stereotypes. But it was amazing. In that same workshop, it then meant I could go, so what's Russia's viewpoint? What's Germany's viewpoint? How do you see those things shifting and changing? So this is thinking about those inputs. So that's why the good news is you're not going to be subjective just to my viewpoint. Because I'm 48 years old, and I'm ashamed to admit it was only 2 years ago I finally worked out for myself. My brain is this big. The world is a lot bigger. I will go to the end of my life knowing very, very little. So the better I can make use of the people and information sources around me, the more I will know. I do a lot of strategy facilitation. It's at a team level, it's at an exec level, it's at a board level. I tell you what, they're all just people. Here's one of the things that I learned. I used to get really concerned about what was the right model to use for this. Is it a Venn with 3 parts, or is it a quadrant with 4 parts? If we're talking about marketing, is it the 5 P's of marketing, or is it the 6 P's, or is it the 7 P's? Well, here's the thing I've learned about the world. The world is not divided into models. The world is grey and ambiguous and ever-changing. So are we in the 4th industrial revolution? You could convincingly argue we're in the 5th or we're in the 3rd. All it means is we're in a time of change. What I take out of this industrial revolution, if you currently worked on a farm, imagine you're a group of farmers and I've brought you into the room and I'm telling you the world's going to change. There's these factory things that are starting to be built, and I think they're going to have quite an impact on your life. It doesn't mean that farms aren't going to be here, but they're going to be fundamentally different, and a number of you are going to move to the cities. Can you get a sense of how disruptive that would be for your life or for your family's lives? So the 4th industrial revolution talks about the world is going to be fundamentally different. So if your company has a strategy around digital transformation or mobile first, yeah, really important, but that's the past, right? We are living in a time of shift and change. So I want to step across 3 mega trends, 3 key trends that are happening. Now, it's Craig from IBM, is it? Yeah, I love this. Not pre-planned for IBM to be in the room. I talked earlier about serendipity. So I thought, yeah, I've got a nice challenging presentation here. So, yeah. He may recognise one of the people up there that some of you don't. Some of you may be suffering from the Travis Kalanick phenomenon, going, who is Ginny Romity and why should I be paying attention to her? Again, I'm going to send this full presentation to you so you get the framework, we take photos, that kind of thing. One of the things that I've learned about trends is if you don't give it structure, it's really hard to understand what's going on in the world. So the way that I look at trends, and this is a future vision framework, is the first thing is to think on a time horizon. The future is all about time. Now, furthest out on the edge, you have what I call future new. Signals of new things happening. That guy who could walk with the machine and walked out for the World Cup, that's a beginning signal of the way we move is fundamentally changing. The next level up is startups, because now you're taking R&D out of the labs and you're saying, we think we can attach a commercial value to this. But the nature of startups, and this is the phenomenon of corporates versus startups, is that corporates can't afford to go out of business. They are too established. They can't cannibalise themselves, that sort of thing. Whereas startups, the nature of the ecosystem is most of them will fail, but some won't. So you look at the startups and say, what are people doing? That's an early signal of commercialisation. The next level up is, where is it happening at scale? And that's the example that I get, like a conversation about social media, we're well past scale, right? We're beyond country-sized movements around those things. Then what you start to do is you can look at trends, both in terms of mega trends and trends. Mega trends are intergenerational trends. So why do I say that digital isn't new? Because my 78-year-old father was a French teacher, then he learned a new language called computer programming, and then he became a web developer. I then founded the web divisions of businesses, and my son is now a digital mentor at school. And when I went to school, there was no such thing as a digital mentor. That is 3 generations, right? And the idea of this framework is that Arrow says there are not just 5 megatrends, right? Whatever your industry is, there are multitudes of megatrends impacting on you. This is a framework to say, let's scan the world and see what's happening. The second thing is, so for example, I can talk to people in the food business and they can go, there's a megatrend called convenience, and they're absolutely right. But 10 years ago, there was a megatrend called convenience, right? These are long, slow-moving shifts. So then you say, what are the trends that are happening around us now? And you can talk about artificial intelligence in terms of being the mobile of this generation, right? So we all now know that mobile was really important. Mixed reality, we've looked at, I'm going to touch on it, conscious collaboration. We just did some conscious collaboration there. But here's the major thing I've figured out for myself. If you talk about trends as nouns, people just sit there as you are and passively observe them and go, how interesting. But all you do is you turn them into active trends and you shift the words into verbs, because now it's a behaviour change. So instead of talking about augmented intelligence, I'm telling you, you need to augment your intelligence. I've done it in a multitude of ways already. How did I do it with Cynic? Augmenting my intelligence. Yeah. How old is Google? 2 decades. How out of date was my habit? I could have spoken into my watch, but I typed into a keyboard, right? But I said I won't just rely on what's in my head. Next level, you need to mix reality. The trend isn't mixed reality. You need to say, we need to mix reality. Yeah, digital is really important, but we also need to mix reality. And finally, we need to collaborate consciously. So collaboration is not a new trend. Throwing a bunch of people into a room to talk about stuff was radical for a while. Now you have to be more conscious. When do we work together? When don't we work together? The example where I brought in international graduates, that was really conscious collaboration. I said it's not enough just to talk as a group, who is in the group? So I want to dive in behind the scenes of these things. So if you're looking at augmenting your intelligence, this is the way that I look at the world. So as human beings, one of the things that we pride ourselves, that separates ourselves from other species, is our intelligence. So intelligence is really important to us. But the world shifted where artificial intelligence is now really important. Artificial intelligence isn't a new phenomenon, right? But in terms of momentum, in terms of the level of money going into it, so when you have the Googles, the Baidus, the Tenzins, the Alibabas, the Facebooks, all pouring billions of dollars into it, you can say society is taking this seriously. If you try and compete with just your brain against artificial intelligence, you won't win. I want to know what cynic means. I can't define it as well as artificial intelligence. So you then have to start to say, how do I do more than that? How do I augment my intelligence and think beyond my brain, right? So for me, understanding the shifts and changes, just as I walk between the groups, I'm not going there, I'm there as the expert to tell you what's going on. I'm as much there to learn and understand the shifts and changes in the world. Walking through the streets of Sydney to come here this morning, just being more curious about what's around me that is augmenting my intelligence. So ultimately, what you have to do is you have to think beyond your brain. So superhuman intelligence absolutely can compete against artificial intelligence. Really contentious point that I sometimes make is that I notice that males have a more limited view of artificial intelligence than females. Huge stereotypes in that. But Elon Musk, incredibly smart, will say the robots will be able to do everything, absolutely everything. But that's just not true. But the mistake you make is if you go, yeah, they can't do any part of my job. Robot could be doing what I'm doing. Right now, I'm just playing some stuff. But they can't assemble a group kind of thing. They can't watch the dynamics in the room in the same kind of way.
Dave, how do you define superhuman intelligence?
Yeah, so superhuman intelligence is that phenomenon of it's human intelligence if I just think within inside my head. But if I go, I can think using other people's brains, then that is effectively gives me a superpower, but you have to be really overt about it. Often the future's already arrived, but it wasn't in a form that we're expecting. So we're going, oh, we're going to be living amongst robots, and where are the shiny metallic creatures? Meanwhile, we pick up our phones, we press lift buttons, and robots do everything for us around us. So one of the things is that if you think about artificial intelligence, you have to go hunting more for it. So this is going through IBM's Watson headquarters in New York, again on that same trip, so this is maybe 3 years ago. But here's someone showing us how a doctor works. And here's the thing about if you want to get people to understand a trend, you have to personalize it. So if I tell you about how Watson works, and it could be Watson, it could be another brand, it's about the fundamental platform, you'd all nod your heads and go, oh, how interesting. And then you go back to your jobs and you carry on working the way that you are. But if I personalise it, you take it even more deeply. So I want you to think for a moment, imagine you were sick, or someone that you loved was unwell, and they went to your doctor. Now you think about your doctor's life. When they go home in the evening, do they have time to read every single new study that came out that day relating to that case? Straight away, your brains went, no, there's no way. Now, are you really comfortable that the advice they're giving you is behind the times? No, that's just fundamentally wrong. So what if instead of artificial intelligence and replacing people, we augmented their intelligence and the computers worked with the doctor to say, here are the symptoms, here are some new studies that may be of interest to look at. And as soon as you hear that, you go, of course, that's how the world has to work. So same thing for your industry, for your job. What are the things that we can hand off? What are the things that people need to do? Now, I love this here in that I'm about to play a promo for IBM Watson. But one of the things that I've learned is people often look at product demos and go, oh, I feel like I'm being sold to. But what you should actually be doing is going, what products are people putting out there and what do I learn from it? So you have a look at this 1 minute demo of IBM Watson being used in call centres and think about your own experience. Has anyone ever rung a call centre before? Yeah, anchor in that feeling and watch this.
Customers want great support, fast, but agents are often trapped dealing with calls for minor issues, and customers with more complex problems are trapped in the queue. Before long, everybody has hit the boiling point. Watson can turn down the heat by taking care of the easier requests for you. That way, customers with tough problems get to talk to a real person before they can get steamed, and that's just better for everybody. Watson Virtual Agent, great at customer support.
So as you look at what different products are doing, it opens up new possibilities. So one of the things I'd never thought of in terms of AI was that parallel processing, which once I know it is so obvious. So how many calls can a human being handle at once? One, right? Really skilled person can put someone on hold, right? How many can a computer handle at once? We are thousands, we are infinitely scalable, right? Now, I had never thought that a lot of those things can be dealt with really easily, freeing up the people to deal with the more complex stuff. So for example, as a futurist, I could say, what stuff am I subjecting you to that I might be able to automate and free up time for the other side of things? Take that same framework with what you do. But again, I'm going to apply the Uber Travis Kalanick phenomenon. You go, who are the people behind this stuff and how do they view the world? And don't just take one person's view, go exploring. But what I find fascinating about Ginny Rometty is not only is she CEO of IBM, she's an engineer. So she's kind of got that dual perspective. And last year, Kara Swisher, one of the hardest hitting tech journalists, asked her about this AI and what her viewpoints were around it. So again, I'm not going to play you the hour interview, but if you find this interesting, everything has a clickable link, go watch the whole thing. But I just want to play 4 minutes of it and have a listen to this conversation.
They don't always line up in time.
So there's a lot of richness in that. One of the things is that passing comment, who does the teaching, right? I find most organisations are approaching AI as a technology thing and we need some inputs, but they're not flipping it around to go, how do we teach and now how do we systemise that? Because all the biases just get built into the machines. And I'll give you an example. People talk about, oh, one of our differences as human beings is empathy. The machines can't do empathy. Have you ever met a person who didn't seem that empathetic to you? Right? Remember the point I made about humour? So I can program a robot to be quite empathetic to a point. But who teaches that robot how to be empathetic? If it's my non-empathetic engineer teaching it, it's not going to be best of breed. But if I go, who are the people and how do I get them working together? I've seen that clip before, but not in this context. A realisation I had, repeating trend with the web. When websites first came along, people said, oh, that's a computer thing. The computer department needs to manage our website. Then the marketing department went, oh, that's our brand. We need to manage that. And they got involved. And then someone went, oh no, it's a whole new thing. We need an e-commerce division of the business. Same thing is happening with AI, right? So if you can accelerate that process. This is the economist Rudy Dornbusch. He talked about things take longer to happen than you think they will. So all call centres are going to be staffed in that way. It's going to take longer than we think. Self-driving cars, they're going to be on the streets everywhere. But hang on, what about that 1% we can't get right? It always takes longer. But the flip side of that is that then they happen much faster than you ever thought they could. So the point that I go, whoa, my job has gone, my child's job has gone, my competitors are using AI, that's not a single 1 year drop it in, sort it out kind of project. So that's where you all need to think like futurists. As I mentioned before, you have to look around the world for different perspectives. This is Fei-Fei Li out of Stanford, who now heads up Google's AI and machine learning team and at Google Cloud. She gave a fascinating presentation, deeply knowledgeable, and she talked about a major accomplishment where they had finally got the system to recognise the photograph of a cat. Now notice how underwhelmed you may be by that, but you think about the photo of a cat, how many different cats there are. What if it's only the tail of a cat, the ears of a cat, right? The brain does all that processing. But she went on to make the point that her 3-year-old daughter could recognise a cat and her daughter was not about to take over the world. But if someone needed a cat recogniser, right? So what's the equivalent of your cat recogniser? The point I make about that Travis Kalanick clip, you know the point that he said, what steering wheel? and said to the editor, what are you talking about? What is the steering wheel equivalent in your industry? The thing that you take for granted things must have. Question your assumptions. Now, to bring it into the real world, on that same trip, also went into Google's New York engineering headquarters. And one of the people we chatted with is Craig Neville Manning, who started that headquarters. And I asked him, somewhat provocatively, because your role as a futurist is to provoke and to challenge, while he was talking, I Googled Google. And I was able to say, now Craig, Google's 17 years old, so you're hardly startup at the edge of things, but what's your view of what's new? Where's the world going to? And he thought about it genuinely, and he said, well, not quite sure. He said, but I'll tell you something. Just last weekend, I went out and bought an Amazon Alexa. So if you're not familiar with Amazon Alexa, it's the speaker that you can talk to. Now, how many people have a speaker that they can talk to with some sort of artificial intelligence in your homes at the moment? Have a look around the room. Because know what I just coached you in? Most people put their hand up and go, I'm so interested in my own world. But it's your opportunity to go, where is the rest of the world at? So what was that percentage response rate? First time I've asked that question, by the way. What do you reckon?
15.
Yeah, I think we're maybe 15. So where are we at on that bell curve with it? Right? Keep asking those questions and what's the number, because every company should be playing with that stuff. Because Craig said he just 3 years ago went out and bought one, and he was surprised by how good it was. He went out and bought a second one and put it in another room in their home. What he didn't share with us is going, actually at Google we're lagging behind Amazon and we've been a bit slow and we're busily working on our own Google Home device now. But they have, and they've launched it. So here's the thing, if you haven't got the technology, get it and start playing with it. Because I want to share with you two stories. The second thing is, take a systems point of view, but then personalise it back at a personal point of view. So I did two things. One is I bought for my father a Google Home Mini at Christmas time. I didn't tell him I was doing a social experiment with him. So $120, he had a cool present. Here's the social experiment. I couldn't have predicted what he would have done for his first use of it when we set it up, but here's what he did. He lives on his own. He said, tell me how to make banana bread. Google Home Assistant didn't say banana what, explain to me what banana bread is. It said, I have found Edith's recipe for fantastic banana bread. Would you like me to read out the ingredients or the steps? And he said, tell me the steps. And she said, step number 1, get some butter, get some flour, get some bananas. And it was just this amazing dynamic of going, here is this wasn't typing, it was a really, really, really different phenomenon.
I hadn't understood his accent.
Yeah. Wow, yeah. Well, that's why Google Home says we speak Australian, right? So you can look at that spread, you can look at that curve. What accents are they handling? Where are they at in the world? But here's the second thing. My 16-year-old son was so impressed. He'd been watching it for a while. He went and bought one in February for $75. So 120 to 75. He hunted, he got it down there. But here's what happened. You know how Ginny Rometty talked about displacement? As a father, I was displaced. He came to me and he said, Dad, I've got an eye infection. I said to him with fatherly wisdom, son, eye infections, I'll tell you what to do. He said, no. He said, Google's told me. He said, hey Google, what do I do about an eye infection? And it told me what I should do is, and he recited back to me and I went, yeah, that's much better than my advice would have been, right? That's not off in the future. That's just, yeah, here and now. Okay, so just to touch on in this closing 10 minutes, a couple of things. One of the things I want to do is just before I close out, talking about a social experiment, you are part of a social experiment. Before you leave the room, could I please ask you to come and grab a pen, and you can do this while you're listening, no problem, we'll do it at the end, and fill in this assessment form. Top of the assessment form it says is, please be completely honest, we can take it, and any criticisms will be a real help. So useful to know what you did like, if you liked some things, but to know what you didn't like and what you do differently would be really valuable. Just to dive into mixed reality, which we've already taken a look at, but I just want to give another context. Anyone familiar with Google Street View? Okay, so safe assumption you all are. Anyone familiar with dementia? Whether it's someone you love or just knowing about it, right? Now you all know about both of those things. Has anyone ever had the idea of using Google Street View to help cure dementia? This is what I love about innovation. Things we know colliding in unexpected ways. This is 6 minutes long. I'm not going to play the full thing through, but well worth a watch. But have a look at this. So I'm just going to pause that there, but it's one of those things for me that when you see it, you go, but of course, you know. So like, what are those of course things within your industry, within your business? How do you help people time travel using things that already exist? Mixed reality, I've been talking probably for 5 years. I started calling it blended reality, but then Microsoft termed it mixed reality, and I checked and I think their marketing budget's slightly larger than mine, so I've decided to adopt that term. But mixed reality encompasses virtual reality and encompasses augmented reality, but I think it also pushes further than Microsoft shows it. So those show you it in the framework of what they do. And again, this is linked, you can dive into it. But how do you overlap human and computer environments? And I love how they call the human interacting with the environment is called conventional reality, but throw a computer into there and you've now got mixed reality. So you have the physical reality end of it, augmented reality, where I can still see physical reality, but it's overlaid with data. I've got digital reality with virtual, where I'm completely immersed into it. But I think that line needs to push further out, because that's where you get into the Internet of Things, just the physical environment having little bits of data without me wrapping anything around me kind of thing. If you look at this environment, we're moving between, this is digital. When I'm going onto my phone, that's digital. When I'm asking you to fill in an assessment form with a ballpoint pen, because I know I will get less skewed responses than if I say those people who can be bothered logging into your phones or filling it in by email afterwards. So I'm saying, please stay in the room until you fill in the form. When you kind of say, well, what point is it at? One of the key points that you have as a human being that we're 1 million miles away from is your ability to move through the physical environment. So me pairing you up and moving you around the room, if you were all tally robots trying to wheel around and pair together, it just wouldn't happen the same way. But what you do is have a look out in the world. What are the best in the world doing? So this is looking at Boston Dynamics. And Mark Raybert, the CEO, talks about, I happen to believe that robotics will be bigger than the internet. The internet lets every person reach out and touch all the information in the world, but robotics let you reach out and touch and manipulate all the stuff in the world. Now what I love about that statement is I read that and go, that sounds impossible. But if I go back 20 years and someone said, we're going to build a system where you can get all the information in the world, I'd go, no, you're not, right? So now what you can do is you can track and see where they're at. I'll just play the opening minute of this. This is a year old, but this is showing where Boston Dynamics is at. There's a really recent clip that came out in the past week that shows where the Spot the Dog has evolved to, but this gives you the best insight. So have a look at this. So I'm going to pause it there. That's a great example of that slower and faster than you think it will. On the one hand, a child could be lifting and moving things and going upstairs and opening doors so much better. But at the same time, if I have tasks that are just moving this from here to there, that's what's happening around us. When you dive into the thinking, this is the key principle. Dive into the hidden giants, the people behind this stuff. He has what he calls his robot religion, and you need to look at how the computer interacts with the robot, interacts with the physical world. This is this beyond digital. This is this mixed reality. To close out on the final trend, which we've done already, so I just want to give it a context. When you collaborate, we now need to do it far more consciously, not just throw people together in rooms and go, yeah, we're all collaborating. Think about the word collaboration. What does it mean? A collaborateur is actually someone who conspired with the enemy. So collaboration does not mean teamwork. It's a different way of working. I could put that image up in front of people and go, how do you feel about that? And some people will go, horrific. What kind of a world are we creating? But then another voice will say, I think it's really cool. And you have to go, who's correct? And the point is you are both correct, you know? Unless we collaborate, we can't build those things. I find it really useful as a futurist to look back at the past to understand the future. Look how horrific that is. We put people in darkened rooms, not talking to each other, just looking at this light on screen. But does it shift the planet forward? Absolutely, in the right kind of way. When I send the presentation through, it is well worth diving into a particular talk that Satya Nadella of Microsoft gave. So if I put this in front of a conference, 100 people in a room, 95% of people, 99% can name Bill Gates. CEO of Microsoft. Almost no one can name Steve Ballmer, who was CEO of Microsoft for 14 years. Satya Nadella replaced Steve Ballmer, who was a great CEO, but he was a hard-charging CEO, and has been responsible for the Microsoft shift to a more open culture. So I'm running a Mac there, but I'm swapped my iPad out for a Surface. These shifts and changes have a financial impact on things. In the clip, Satya talks about it is more important to be a learn-it-all than it is to be a know-it-all. This is superhuman intelligence. The days are well past where you can know it all about your industry. But if you have the ability to connect people together. My frustration with using PowerPoint and Keynote is it's a broken way of presenting. It is really linear. So if Kobe made a point, I go, nice point. Anyway, my next slide is this, and I come back onto that track. So you can actually innovate and rechange the way that you do things. So what I'm doing here is pulling together the knowledge from great people around the world. And as I mentioned, my dad is a web developer. He thought he was a retired web developer, but never retire if your son's a futurist. So I said, can't we build our own presentation tool? So I have all of these insights within a single database that gets pulled into a browser. And then what I can actually do is go, I just want to shift brain pattern. So I want to talk about design thinking. So please bring to the forefront of the presentation these kind of people here. Although I think our kind of presentation has been too male dominated in terms of who's been presenting. So actually, can I jump to Indra Nooyi of PepsiCo, and can I get her to start to talk about her view and how she manages things? So that, what's that? Yeah. So just the ability to kind of shift things. So just to close out, what we've done today is looked at how you can think like a futurist. And the 4 mindsets you can remember with the word leap. Because what I've learned is if people learn a new way of thinking, they don't actually apply it unless they can keep it in their brain. So you've been more progressive looking forward. You've leveraged knowledge from the past. You've leveraged the people around you. Then what you have to do is get far more experimental with what you do. Push up into the impossible. And then you have to be more active and just do things. In terms of who I am, if any of this is of interest, I kind of do 3 key things. So I do what I've done here. I speak with groups. I coach people in different ways of working. And I also facilitate strategy sessions. If you kind of want any of these ideas about the future, open to have pretty much a free day in Sydney tomorrow. So if you want to have a coffee and just talk about stuff, just come and see me. And if we can meet up centrally tomorrow, that'll be awesome. Only too happy to do it. And then I showed you that database. There's plenty of stuff I haven't covered today. So if I talk to you, I can actually go, oh, you should look at this, you should look at that. As I mentioned, this is kind of a prototype session. So what I do in Auckland is I run a 2-day session where I coach people how to think like a futurist, share the tools and techniques, take them through it, get them working on actual business problems. When we do that, it's about $2,500 to $3,000 for those 2 days. So I've thought I'll do something in Sydney, middle of the year, so 22nd of August, that the official price will be $950, but there's an early bird which is $750, and all of you people over the next month are like super early birds. So if you kind of go, that's interesting, I'm not standing by the lifts with a credit card taking bookings, right? But I'm going, this is real, it is going to happen. So there'll be the opportunity to come along to that. And we actually have a small group of people involved in health and safety. I'm just doing something this afternoon around some of these things. But thank you very much for all your time this morning. As I said, I'm going to send everything across to you. If there's anything you want to know, feel free to connect in. If you could please make sure you fill in a form before you go out, that would be great. If you don't have time, I'll happily fill it in for you, but I think it's better if you do it. And you're welcome to stay and chat to other people. So thanks very much, everyone. And those people who are staying on in the afternoon, we're kind of 12 o'clock, we're going to have some lunch and then reset the room. But for now, it's just half an hour of casual time.